right. Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you here today. I must start by prefacing this talk with, I got off a plane from Australia yesterday, so I have no idea what time it is. If I fall asleep somewhere during the middle of this, if somebody just gets up on stage, pokes me, I'll wake up and move on. But other than that, everything should be fine. I'm excited to be here. My name's Nash. I'm a developer advocate for a company called Sonar. Sonar, if you don't know, is the home of clean code. We do products like SonarQube and Sonar Cloud, which live in your pipelines to tell you if you're writing quality code. And SonarLint, which can live in your IDE. It's a free IDE extension that also can tell you if you're writing clean and good code. I always like it when machines tell me how to be better, so I'm a big fan of that. Other than that, like I said, my name's Phil. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. You can find me on the internet everywhere as Phil Nash, as best I could anywhere, including my favorite thing, which is finding the URL Phil Nash. I'm very delighted by that. Cool. So let's carry on with let's get on with the day. We've had an incredible keynote to start the day with. Let's get on with talking about passwords, or indeed how I think passwords are terrible. And I hope you agree with me. But if you don't yet agree with me, I have some slides to try and convince you of that before we move on to getting rid of passwords and making life better for everybody on the internet. I want to start with password reuse. Users are terrible with passwords, it turns out. I think we know this as developers, but a little intuitively, but there's data for it as well. Back in 2018, end of 2018, Google did a survey where they asked a bunch of questions about passwords, including about password reuse. The question being, how often do you reuse passwords? And so we have the very honest people, I think, on this blue slice here, which was 52% of people said, I reuse passwords some of the time. And you're like, okay, some of the time. You've signed up for 400 different websites, you've used the password once or twice, and that's fine-ish. You're putting yourself in trouble. Of course, the people we love is this slice here, this 35% of people who said, I never reuse passwords. And we're like, thank you. You're saving the world for all of us. Your accounts will be safe when some other application leaks your passwords onto the internet. And the people we have to worry about are this 13% down here, who when asked if they reuse passwords, they say yes, all of the time. I love these people. They're very honest. I like that. So you don't have to be that honest at a survey. It's wonderful. But what they said is I have a password, one password, not the app, a single password. And I love it because they are going to get hacked everywhere. They're going to lose access to every single one of their accounts at all times. And they just don't know it yet. Or actually, this survey was 5 years ago, so they probably do know it by now. Fun. So we have to protect these people. That's the point. We have to protect people who are reusing their passwords, some or all of the time. In the same survey, they also asked, do you use a password manager? And I think this was a Google survey, so this included the browser's built-in password manager. And 24% of people said, yes, they use a password manager. That's cool, but that means 3/4 of people don't, so that's less cool. And actually, if you think back to the previous graph, if 24% of people use a password manager so they can use different passwords each time, and 35% of people say they do use different passwords each time, that's a gap of 11% of people who are either, again, maybe lying, maybe they, I don't know, have a very good memory, their password manager is in their heads. It could be people that have a scheme for building up passwords based on the website they're on and some other kind of set of variables that they know about. But it just seemed like a weird gap to me. Anyway, we have to deal with the people that are reusing passwords. That's given. Because these are the passwords they're reusing. It's very exciting that NordPass, a password manager in this case, released their top 10 passwords of 2022. This is a while back. There's probably a 2023 list by now. I like how password and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 always battle for the top spot. I feel like password, whilst not as creative, does include more typing to actually get it into the password field. Whereas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is a very lazy one, although not quite as lazy as I guess as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is down there in 8th. People will continue to use the same passwords and the ones we already know. And then, of course, as I kind of mentioned earlier, not only do we have to be, as developers, have to look after people's passwords, but we have to be aware that other developers, other applications are not looking after people's passwords and will leak them all over the internet. If you don't know haveibeenpwned.com, you should check that out right now. Pop your email address or your phone number in there, and it will tell you exactly how many accounts that have leaked your details out onto the internet somewhere. And the point being that because those details are out on the internet, replay attacks, if you are reusing passwords, then it's very easy to take all the data from LinkedIn, which was actually hacked a number of years ago, and then apparently also just this week. Exciting to know. They can use that data and just plug it into a whole bunch of other sites and see if it works for you. It's a credential stuffing attack, and it very much targets people who are reusing passwords. So passwords are terrible. Good. But they're our kind of primary thing we use to protect user accounts on the web these days, and so we have to do something about that. And we have, there are things that we've done over the years, which we're going to cover as part of this talk to make things better, make the security better. But the problem is that logging into an account, logging into any kind of application on the internet is not ever the task the person coming to it wanted to do. Like logging in is the thing you do before you get to do the task. Registering and choosing a password is the thing you have to do before you get to do the task. And so we have this bunch of trade-offs where we're trying to build applications that people want to use and people enjoy using. And so we actually end up trading kind of user experience off against security. And that's kind of the way I want to look at methods that we've used to log people into user accounts over the time, how we can make it better, how we can make it better with the existing methods until we get to the end and we can remove passwords entirely. So, considering passwords on those kind of two scales, it doesn't look good, I'm afraid, because the user experience is bad, right? We expect a user to turn up to our website and pick password that they've never thought of before, has no connection to their name or the site's name or their dog's name or the year they were born, but they don't. We made it hard to remember good passwords and hard to choose them. And basically we need a third-party piece of software in order to make this worthwhile. We need a password manager to help this out. But on the security side of things, as we've just been through, is also bad. It turns out it's easy to break those easy passwords. So if you picked something from our top 10 of the year, then you're definitely losing access to that account very quickly. But also, there are leaks, there's credential stuffing attacks. And I haven't even mentioned phishing. Like that is a great attack on passwords as well. If you can convince somebody to pop their password, their username and password into your website instead of the website they mean to, then you also own their account. We're very lucky that for the most part, phishing attacks are bad, and the emails that try to convince you to sign into other sites are also bad. It turns out the best ones of those are the ones that they fake when they send you one at work to test you. It turns out they're not trying to phish you at all, which is great. And I always think that in a room full of great developers, anyone here could probably build a really great phishing attack. Don't. But I bet you could. So passwords, they're bad experience and they're bad for security, so that's bad. So the answer is use a password manager. If we could get every single one of our users to use a password manager to look after their passwords and pick unique different ones for each one, for each site they ever log into, then we'd be great, we'd be in a great place. But we already know, that that's not going to happen. It's impossible to make somebody use a third-party application. But the experience does get better. Like if you have a password manager in all your browsers, then you don't ever have to remember passwords. You don't ever have to come up with them. You don't ever have to repeat them. You just, autofill your logins, your registrations, and carry on with your life. You're fine. You're great. And the security side of things is also good too, because they then become long, difficult to remember passwords, which are impossible to kind of target, especially with a brute force attack. You end up with unique passwords everywhere, which is wonderful. Although you remain vulnerable to phishing, although if you're using that autocomplete from a password on a different domain to the one that you stored it on, so it kind of helps. It's a good place. But 24% of people at the end of 2018 said they use a password manager, and I bet that that's not enormously more these days, which is just a shame. And like I said, it's not really our job to try and get people to use other software just to use our software, so that sucks. But can we improve this use of passwords before we even get to a password manager? We actually have some web APIs which we can use and put into play to make this a little bit better. And that's nice, so I'm going to show you that first. The first thing to do is add the autocomplete attribute. It's my favorite attribute on the input element. It has so many things it could be. Autocomplete can be used for usernames, for addresses, and every different field in an address. But if you use autocomplete new password, some browsers, Firefox mostly, will offer you a generated, securely generated password, will offer you a random one. That kind of gives the user an idea that they shouldn't just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again, but maybe something like this. That's Firefox. I don't think other browsers do it, sadly, although this is also something that a password manager can hook into as well and say, hey, that's a new password, let me take over this field and generate something for you. So that's cool. And then when you come to, so new password would be used on something like a registration page. And then when you come to log in, use autocomplete for username and for current password. And again, the browser can now hook in and go, I know, I can feed that from my password dictionary, or your password manager itself can feed it, and just autocomplete stuff for you. Makes things a lot easier for users to enter stuff. Current password and new password are particularly useful on those change password pages as well, so your autocomplete doesn't try and fill in with all the same password in 3 different fields. It's useless. And then, on the other hand, there is a much, I think, forgotten API, the Credential Management API. This Credential Management API, in its first iteration, gave us, as developers, access to the browser's password manager. It gives us access to offer up whether the browser will offer to store a username, a credential, a username and password, and then once we've done that, once we have control over that, retrieve that as well and use it ourselves. And so the Credential Management API allows us to store and retrieve credentials. And in this particular case, when we're looking at passwords, we can store and retrieve a password credential. And so the code is fairly similar. It's fairly simple. We start by checking if we have a password credential available in the browser, and then once we have a credential that you know that works, so either at registration or after a successful login, we can create a password credential object and then ask the browser to store that credential. This is going to pop up your regular browser password manager saying, hey, do you want me to store your username and password? It's a promise because we're waiting for the response from the user, so it's just kind of a permissions dialog here. And if it goes through, if the user says yes, then we can carry on. But if the user says yes, what it means is later we can go and retrieve those credentials using the same API. So in this case, navigator credentials get. If we ask for password true, it's going to again ask the user, do you want to use your credential stored for this account to log into this application? If the user accepts that, we get the credentials. We can plug that into our form and move the user on. You can even do it silently. You can actually do this without a permissions dialog as well if you feel confident enough to do that. Asking for an unmediated password credential means that you can just retrieve a user's credentials if there's only one stored in the browser for that site. You can retrieve it immediately. If there's more than one, then you still have to ask which account you're logging into. Although it is to note that you never want to silently log somebody in after they've logged out. So when you do log somebody out, you want to call on navigator credentials, prevent silent access, so that you can't unmediatedly log them straight back in again. That would be weird. And this is what it looks like. This is in an Android, in Chrome and Android. You go and log in. In this particular case, you've entered a username and password, and it was successful. And the browser's saying, hey, do you want to save that in your browser? Or in fact, actually, what Chrome is going to say is save this to your Google account, which is even better than just your browser, because that's going to sync across your devices. That's going to sync to your laptop, any other Android devices you have, even Chrome on Safari, Chrome on Safari, Chrome on iOS. It technically is Safari, but that's a whole different story. Once you've asked that, as long as you're using the the Credential Management API to ask this, you then get access to say, hey, next time around, do you want to log in as this account? So this is the browser Chrome saying, giving the options. It would normally have a much nicer URL there, but that's just me testing stuff. Do do you want to sign in as this user? And so we get this one-click kind of sign-in process, or an account switcher, account chooser, if you have multiple signed up. And so we end up going from typing passwords in, because again, we're trying to use this to encourage people not using password managers to use this. We go from typing a password in that you have to remember to storing it in the browser and getting a one-click experience to sign in. And so the experience is much nicer. Like, you don't have to remember the passwords, and you do get this one-click login experience, which is cool. But it doesn't really help us create more secure passwords. Like the kind of new password autocomplete is a lovely idea, but that doesn't stop somebody writing password into the field. And so it remains weak to all the previous security issues that we had. But it's a nicer experience, and that's something, right? So we move to two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is adding another device, another thing that you have on you to also verify that you're the same person that signed up with it in the first place. Normally something, so we have something you know with passwords, and then something you have, either a phone number or a device or something like that. Two-factor authentication is absolutely there to bolster the security side of passwords. It might look like this. If you're texting, you get that 6-digit code sent through to you. Go log in. Exciting stuff. But the user experience degrades with this, and that's the problem, right? We have what I think is a more secure version, but now we have 2 steps for people to log into. They tend to need another device. Normally this works through your phone, and the best way to get people to use it, the easiest way, is via text message. It's the thing that's available to most people. And thus that then requires a phone signal, which doesn't help if you're in a plane, underground, or in another country that you don't have signal for. So that sucks. But it is more secure, right? It's so much more difficult to attack an account with a leaked password if you also need a physical device that person has access to. It's still vulnerable to phishing. If you can build yourself a phishing attack that asks for a username and password, you can build one that asks for a username, password, and then 6 digits on the next screen. And there are targeted attacks possible on SMS. Targeted is the key there. Again, this is a good thing for most people, but high-value accounts can be targeted via SMS. This is the time where I start a rant about Twitter taking SMS two-factor authentication away from people. It was a few months ago now when that was decided to be a good idea, that SMS as a two-factor authentication thing would be taken away. And a whole bunch of people in security cheered because SMS is a weaker version than, say, using an authenticator app on your device. But there were 2 things there. SMS authentication was being taken away from regular users, but if you paid for a subscription on Twitter, then you could still use SMS. And arguably, people paying for subscriptions had higher value accounts who were more likely to be targeted in an attack. And secondly, about 85% of people using two-factor authentication on Twitter were using it via SMS, and so it basically removed that and did a bit of work to try and encourage them to use an authenticator app. But I reckon there's probably a lot less two-factor authentication on Twitter now than there ever used to be, and so that sucks. The people with high-value accounts, where knowing somebody's phone number and being able to either engineer a SIM swap or attack the back-end nature of SMS, and ask me about that another time. I don't have time to go into how bad that is right now. You have to be targeting somebody. It has to be worthwhile. The value has to be worthwhile. So for most people, SMS is good. But can we make it better? Those 2 steps are an awkward user experience, and I get easily distracted. If I have to go and wait for a text message, I tell you what, I will end up scrolling through some social media app on my phone before it arrives. And then I look up at the screen and I was logging into this. Happens all the time to me, honestly. We can make it better, though. We can make it better. First up, I go back to the HTML and the input element again. And input mode numeric is a nice little addition which actually gives you, on a mobile device, a numeric keyboard. If you're only asking for 6 digits, you don't need the entire the entire text keyboard. That's a nicety. The important thing actually here is autocomplete again. If you have autocomplete as one-time code, then Safari will pick that up and say, hey, I need to go and look in text messages and see incoming one-time codes and fill them in the autocomplete bar. So I have an example of that happening. And you've probably seen this if you have an iPhone. You go and log in, and the text message is going to come into your app with your two-factor authentication notice in it. And then, whoop, right there in the middle at the top of the keyboard, it's suggesting you autocomplete with that 6 digits. So you get this nice, again, one-click experience where it then puts it into the form, actually tends to submit the form as well, and you're logged in. That's nice. And then if you're really bought into the Apple ecosystem and you're using an iPhone and you're using a Mac and you're using Safari on the Mac and you have messages set up to arrive on your Mac as well, then it will work on the desktop as well, which I think is very cool. You go log in on Safari desktop, and if the text message comes through successfully, you end up with this autocomplete right there on the desktop, which if you've ever had it happen to you, is a pretty magical experience. I had to engineer this because I don't use Safari, but it's a lovely experience. It submits, you find you're through. But that only works, as far as I know, well on Safari. And so Chrome and Google with Android and Chrome went a different way. They went with the WebOTP API. WebOTP, one-time password. It's really actually just another name for the credential management API. I have to apologize at this point. This talk is actually just a credential management API talk. It's coming back again after this, don't you worry. The credential management API, in this case, needs a couple of things. Like, it only works with SMS right now, so I will focus on the SMS nature of this. And in your SMS, you need to add a line at the bottom, which includes an @ symbol and the domain that you're logging into, then a space, a hash, and the 6 digits, or whatever digits you're using for the one-time password. If you add that, then go to the code. We then ask if we have an OTP credential available. We can call on navigator credentials get. So there's no need to store a credential in this case. We're just trying to get it from the system. We call on navigator credentials get, and we pass OTP with an object that has a property of transport, and that property can be an array, and that array can have one thing, and the string, that one thing is the string SMS, which is a bit of an odd API, but I'll come to that in a minute. If we do that, the browser will pop up a permissions dialog to say, hey, can I use this number from this text message that came in as your code? And that looks like this. This is on an Android device. I have to be ready to pause again. I make these videos go too quickly. We hit login, the text message comes through. We also get this dialog pop up at the bottom. So I don't use Android that much, and I don't know if you can change this, but at the top that's the text message, which is cool because it had that little button to copy the number, which is useful. But at the bottom we get the permissions dialog saying, hey, do you want to allow us to use this number? And if the person then clicks allow, you receive that object with the code in it. You can fill it into the form, you can submit the form, carry on, you're logged in. That's cool. Turns out, and I don't have a video for this, but if you are fully bought into the Chrome ecosystem and you have your Android device and your laptop somewhere nearby to each other, and the text message comes into Chrome, into your Android device, Chrome on the desktop can indeed ask for the message across the network. It's very cool. It's using your Google account in the background to do that syncing. When it works, again, it's magical. My only problem is I'm also not in the Chrome ecosystem. I use Firefox on the desktop, and so I only managed to make this work once or twice. I was very excited when I did, and I could never capture it again. But it will work on the desktop if you are doing that across there as well. And so, two-factor authentication can now be made better. If we use that credential management API together, we get 2 minimal steps to log people in. It's just click yes, I'd like to log into this person. Click yes, I'd like to use that code that came in. It doesn't stop us needing that second device or a phone number or something to do two-factor authentication with and the phone signal. But in those ideal situations where the browsers support this and you have a phone signal, then you get a much nicer experience. And on the security side of things, we already know that two-factor authentication is making it more secure than just a password on its own. Lovely. Very happy about that. So, security keys are probably something many people in this room have. You're probably carrying some on a keychain right now with you. A YubiKey or something like that. It's something your business will have given you to give you extra secure access to SSH or your production systems. And that's cool. And we can do this in the browser now, right? This is web authentication, WebAuthn. WebAuthn, of course, is just the credential management API with a different name. It's navigator credentials create. Again, it's the same thing. WebAuthn will give us this, it's public and private key cryptography, which is wonderful. We ask the browser in this case to create ourselves a public key. Our server will sends a challenge, which is a random string of bytes. We also then use the RP ID as the domain that you're on. We set up some other user details, and then pass in some algorithms that we're happy to use. And this is going to ask the user to interact with their web authentication key and create that public-private key. The private key is then used to encrypt the challenge, and the encrypted challenge and the public key are returned to the server, and the server can then use that public key, decrypt the challenge, make sure it was the same as the original one, and you are registered. You have that key registered. Then on the other side of things, when you come back to use it again, we use navigator credentials get. In this case, we ask again for the public key. We provide a new challenge from the server, and hopefully we're asking for that existing credential that we had. We have an ID for it as well. And the same thing happens. In this case, we're not creating any new keys, but the private key, which stays on the device, never leaves the device, signs that challenge and returns it, and the server can use your existing public key to verify that and pass you through, which is cool. Two-factor authentication with WebAuthn is great. We get these two minimal steps, like actually interacting with a authenticator key is really easy. But you need that authenticator key or a platform authenticator. We can do it with fingerprints or Face ID as well. But these keys are, for the most part, attached to the device they're created on. The private key will never leave that device. And so either you need to move your key around or be able to register multiple keys so that you can log in with multiple devices. But the security is great, right? We've overcome the password problem because we have a much better two-factor authentication. In fact, it's public and private key cryptography. You can leak that public key anywhere you want to because it's only useful for verifying challenges that you provide on the domain that you provided it on. And so it's also phishing resistant. This is locked to the domain as well as the device, and that's great. The only problem, I think the problem here really is, again, we're a room full of developers who most people probably have one of these things, but we're talking about regular users, protecting them, and so making them buy a third-party tool in order to interact with this is bad. But we do have platform authenticators which are increasingly available on devices, so we're kind of getting there. But that's where we get to removing passwords entirely. And I know I started this with the future of passwordless, and I've got to everything using passwords that we can possibly do so far. And so let's get to removing passwords. The future of passwordless authentication is absolutely passkeys. Passkeys is sort of a consumer-facing term for this. It's one being pushed by Google, by Apple, and by other kind of browsers and plugins using this. Passkeys are really multi-device credentials. Using web authentication, again, the credential management API, using web authentication in order to create these. They are slightly different to general web authentication because of this multi-device nature to them. It's web authentication, but it solely uses the platform authenticator. It's solely using things like the fingerprint ID on a keyboard or a Face ID or a Windows Hello, anything on your mobile device, uses that platform authenticator. And so what it does is, because it's using the platform authenticator, we verify that the user is on the device and is the user, when you're registering as that user, and then when you verify later, you have to be that same user because we're either using the biometrics or it can fall back to your device password. And so the user becomes verified on the device. It's always going to be the same user that is capable of logging into this, or of accessing the private key on the device. And so we know it's the same user that set it up in the first place. It then authenticates the user with the server because we're then using that private key to encrypt the challenge that the server sends and pass that back. The public key uses to decrypt it and authenticate the user. We kind of end up with two factors of authentication in one. Like we have this user verification on the device, and then we pass our encrypted token, our encrypted challenge back to authenticate. So we have verification and authentication take place in two different parts. And the beauty of passkeys, the beauty of this particular version of web authentication is that they sync across your devices. They use your platform accounts, or there are plugins for third-party password managers that allow you to sync those private keys across devices. Those private keys are encrypted by either your platform account or your password manager account, and then synced across to be decrypted, again, back on the device and to be used. And then if that sync is not possible, if you are trying to use platform authenticators, but you have an iOS device and a Windows laptop, you can use that in there is a cross-device syncing method, which I'll show you in just a minute. I have to show this bit of the API because I think it's hilariously Java-like. I don't like having a scroll bar in my code example, but to check that this is available in a browser, you have to ask two things. Is user verifying platform authenticator available? That is, does it have a fingerprint or a face ID or whatever? And is conditional mediation available? Conditional mediation is the ability for the browser to show kind of an account picker for one or more authenticators there. And so if those are available, then we can ask for both. If the function itself is available, then we can then ask that function if it really happens. And once we've got that, we then go through the web authentication side of things again with a couple of tiny differences. And those differences are just this bit at the bottom, the bit where we ask for authenticator selection. So again, in this case, we ask for authenticator attachment to be platform. That is, we need it to be part of the platform. It's not a third-party YubiKey, although some YubiKey or other kind of key, although some implementations do work with that. And then we ask it also to require resident key, which means that the key has to live on the authenticator device. This allows it to do that syncing across the platform. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to show this in a bunch of different things. To start with, I'm going to sign in Safari on my desktop. This has been done a bunch of times, so I'm also signing in with my SonarSource email address. And so when I save my passkey, in this case, it's going to use the fingerprint. We're going to save it from my SonarSource email address. We'll go, and then we've saved that passkey. We're going to log out and log back in just to prove it working in that one browser. So it's going to offer me a bunch. Like I said, it needs to have an account picker. And then right down at the bottom, the latest one was that SonarSource email address. Fingerprint ID again, and we log back in as the same person. Wonderfully, in this demo, that gave me long enough to be pretty sure it had synced across to my iPhone. So let's do the same on the iPhone. In this case, we don't have to sign up. We can go straight into sign in. And it's going to give me that whole list of passkeys again. And right down the bottom of that list is my Sonar email address, where I can then Face ID, and I'm logged into the same account. And you can see, actually, the passkeys are the same on both sides. So that's cool. But then I went to Chrome. And so I'd like to sign in with the passkey, but in Chrome, I haven't stored any passkeys yet. And so what it does is offer me up to use a passkey from somewhere else. It gives me this QR code. And so really the mobile device does kind of become the center of a user's thing for this, because you can then scan it and say, sign in with a passkey. It's going to give me that same login experience that on the iPhone that I had in the Safari browser, but it is transferring that signed challenge back to Chrome to then send back to the server and log you in. And I think that's very cool. And so this is just an example site. This is passkeys.io. You can go and hit that up yourself and have a play around with it to see it working in action. What I would probably, what you would do if you were building this yourself is when a user then logs in with a different browser that doesn't have a passkey stored for it, offer to then create a new passkey for that browser so that they don't have to do the QR code thing every single time. Notably, that QR code thing is also really useful for times when you want to use a shared device, somebody else's laptop to log into your account for some reason. You can scan the QR code with your own device and never store a passkey on their device, so they can't ever log back in as you. And that's very cool. So passkeys. The experience is great. We now don't need to use a password because we are both verifying and authenticating the user in a single action on a single device using our public-private key cryptography. It does require a platform authenticator, and we can't absolutely guarantee that everybody's laptop has a fingerprint scanner on it and everybody's mobile device will happily read their face or their thumbprint or whatever. And so we do still need fallbacks. But for everybody that does have that available to them, we can offer this, and we can offer it now. It's cool. And then that syncing experience is great. That ability to log in one place, and then if you're on the same platform, log in somewhere else with just the biometric scan is wonderful. And I will note, sorry, I normally say it, but earlier, the biometric scan, is something that never leaves your device as well, right? This is just a promise that the device is making that I always will scan and answer the same person. So you're not in any danger of leaking your fingerprints or Face ID or anything like that. And then security passwords are passkeys, are phishing resistant. They're private and public keys, so they're unleakable. As long as that private key never leaves the device, never leaves the device unencrypted, then we're fine. And I'm not technically a security professional. I'm just very interested in this kind of stuff. So I can say, is it perfect? Maybe. There is a couple of little drawbacks, which, as I said earlier, I'm a Firefox user, and browser support is in all the browsers except Firefox right now. Everything online about this says it's coming in 2023, but we're running out of 2023. So come on, Mozilla, you can do it. But it is coming, supposedly. But the nice thing is, like, you can still build around this. It's still a progressive enhancement to security. And if most people, if everybody using Chrome and Safari, which is a very good portion of the internet, or indeed, sorry, Chromium-based browsers even, very good portion of the internet, then we have good support for this already. And not only that, but we're actually starting to see the existence of password managers, those third-party plugins and things, supporting these as well. 1Password has built-in supports for passkeys within their applications and their browser extensions. And so if you do a web authentication thing and you're using 1Password, you'll actually see 1Password pop up to offer to store the passkey itself. And that works in Firefox as well, so that's cool. And actually, so 1Password are very on board with this. I think they're probably somewhat regretting their name, but they are fully on board with getting rid of passwords now, so that's cool. Like, they support it. And not only that, they maintain passkeys.directory, which is a wonderful site that tells you all the places that now allow you to either sign in, either use a passkey as two-factor authentication, which some places are still just doing that, or to sign in using just a passkey. And the places that are actually doing this right now are very cool. Like, it was just a few weeks ago that Google has made it available for you to sign in and use a passkey to sign into your Google account as its primary authentication. Microsoft does it. Your GitHub account can do so. And there are many, many more. Some of them are some of them in passkeys.directory are a little location bound, and so some of them are US only at the moment, things like eBay and Amazon. But like, the big places are doing this, and so it is the time to do this now. It's the time to start offering this as an option to your users. And so those are my recommendations, right? If we want to kind of remove passwords, get rid of passwords, we have to start offering this now and teaching users how this works, as well as preparing our sites for it as well. And so if you are interested in building this or adding this to your own applications, which I hope you are, my recommendations are go and detect passkey support and start to offer this first. There are still places where people won't be able to do this, but we go for this first. If we go for passkey first, we can then fall back to passwords with two-factor authentication later. That's that bit. Do offer to support multiple passkeys. In the case where somebody is not using a password manager like 1Password, to do this, they are still going to have this difficulty between using Chrome and Safari or other browsers that won't sync with each other. So support multiple passkeys, offer to add passkeys to accounts. Fall back to passwords with two-factor authentication. Stick with that. If the account is worth protecting with a passkey, it's definitely worth protecting with two-factor authentication in the case that a passkey can't be used. And then feel free to offer, like, once a user can use their passkeys, offer to remove those older weak credentials, remove passwords, so that they use that as their primary and only method. Remember, these passkeys are secured by either their platform account or their password manager account. And those are hopefully accounts that they can always get back into.
This is about the one slightly kind of trustworthy part that we put into the rest of the system as developers, is that a Google account, or an Apple account, or a 1Password account in this case, is something that a user will always be able to get back to. Because if they lose all their devices, as long as they can get back into their the account that stored their that they used to sync their passkeys, then they can always get back into your application. That's not true for passwords. They lose them, leak them all over the place. Passkeys are stored by those reputable, I hope you agree, organizations. Encrypted, they'll never be able to see them. As long as you can always get back to it, you can always have that passkey. So get rid of the old things if a user can use that solely. I have a bunch of links here. I will publish the slides later. They're out on the internet somewhere. There's a bunch of links I used to both learn about this, but also write about this. This includes some of the other kind of OTP stuff that helps the existing experience. So go fix that experience first if you don't have time to do a full implementation of passkeys, and then let's all work on this together. Let's get rid of passwords. Let's put our trust in public and private key authentication and cryptography, and the fingerprint scanners and face scanners on our devices. That is the future of, that's the state of passwordless right now. I think we can move to a point where we no longer have passwords in the not too distant future. We just have to start that work now. So thank you very much for joining. Again, my name's Phil Nash. I'm a developer advocate for Sona. I will be around for the rest of the conference. In fact, I have another talk tomorrow morning about things that could go to the top 5 issues in all our JavaScript projects. So come check that out. It's at, I think, 9:20. So maybe a little early, but hey, it's fine. Other than that, thanks so much for coming this morning. And I don't think we have time for questions either. Ran out of time. But I'll be around in a purple t-shirt for the rest. Thank you so much.